What had happened was, it's Halloween, and obviously I'm recording this video at home because I didn't take time immediately after service to go record this video. If you're watching, what had happened was, for the very first time, this is just a YouTube playlist that I decided to create a few weeks ago. It helps me process everything that just happened on a Sunday. Sundays are typically busy for me as a pastor because I've prepared messages. I deliver them twice. We have two services. I speak to leaders and volunteers, first-time guests, regulars, people I haven't seen in a while. And man, it's just a lot happening on a Sunday. And sometimes I need to just process everything that had just happened. So today is episode number, I don't really know, Halloween episode 2021. What had happened was, well, I stayed up too late last night watching the Atlanta Braves beat Houston. Tonight could be the night that the Atlanta Braves win the World Series. Tonight's game 5. So I stayed up really late. Also, after the game was over, I was waiting on my son to get home. He had been at an event with our students, some of our students from the church. And so it was almost 1 a.m. Then I woke up this morning and we went to church. I got to church and I had to park way down at the School of Math and Science because after service, we were going to convert our church parking lot into a trunk or treat festival for all of our kids and any community kids that wanted to join us. And so I get a ride from the school, which is about 2 blocks down the road, from somebody running our bus, our van. I get to the church, run through the mic check. Today, I had a friend of mine who's in my leadership pipeline, Ethan Wren. Love this brother to death. He's an 18-year-old young man. Well, he opened up the message after worship with the reading of the passages. I was teaching from John chapter 2, verses 13 through 25, and he was planning to open that up. Well, the way our service typically works is after 3 songs of worship, our worship team leads us in that. Then we have Hannah, who's my assistant, kind of like our executive pastor, if you're okay calling a lady a pastor. And she introduces the service with some vision, some things that are happening around our service, some things that have already happened, explains how you can give, how you can get connected. Well, today she throws this curveball. And she interrupts her flow. And instead of praying at the end, she invites me to come on the stage, where she surprises me and tells the church that she's called our overseers. If you don't know how we're governed, we have external pastors that serve on a board of overseers, as a board of overseers. And she called our lead board of overseers, Pastor Dean Herman, and she surprised me by getting the green light from him for Revolve Church to provide me with a very special gift for pastor appreciation. Well, I don't make a big deal about those things, but I'm super grateful for our church and for my assistant, Hannah, making this special for me. And I'm getting some brand new golf clubs thanks to our church. It's awesome. I don't know if the clubs are going to help me because I really need a new golf swing, probably more than I need golf clubs. But she throws that whole curveball. I didn't even know what to say, so I just said, well, we'll go ahead and pray, stay with the flow. She prays, Ethan comes up and he delivers this reading of the scriptures. Well, he's like me. He couldn't just read through the scriptures. He had to inject some things. And he got to this one spot about making God's house a priority, but sometimes how we might over-prioritize the house of God than the presence of God. And then he said something like this. Man, if you've ever seen God do something in the life of somebody else, it'll make you want to come to church even when it ain't Sunday. And man, he was just about to preach, but that was super special. And then I preached the message. I titled the message, Jesus Unglued. And I really talked about the story. The whole text was from John 2:13 to 25, where Jesus shows up at the temple, flips the tables, and runs the money changers out of the temple and says, get that mess out of my Father's house. And I basically unpacked it by saying that these people, in the name of celebrating freedom, were actually placing people in bondage. And one of my points was really this, that this upset Jesus because he's like undercover boss, if you will. He shows up at Passover as God, but nobody knows he's God. And then he says, like, what are you doing? He sees what they're doing. They're supposed to be celebrating being rescued from bondage, only to find these people. They've turned it into a marketplace and they're creating profits off of placing people in bondage by telling them that their gift and their sacrifice is not good enough. Well, Jesus did not like this. So the Bible says he made a whip and he ran them out of there. The second thing I made a big deal about in Jesus being upset was not as much as the businessmen as it was the customers in which they were acquiring. I just imagine after several years, some family members started, instead of bringing a sacrifice, they started taking the pathway of convenience and purchasing one when they got there. And here's what I like to call that: simulated sacrifice, which creates a counterfeit celebration. And I just challenged our church to consider these thoughts. Is my sacrifice really a sacrifice, or has it been simulated? Now listen, I had this thought after the service. When I say the word sacrifice, whatever comes to your mind, that's probably the very thing that God's inviting you to consider sacrificing. All right? And then I ended the message by explaining the significance of our celebration is closely tied to our sacrifice. I told a story about a time I picked cucumbers literally to raise money as a child to go to Disney World. And I walked up and down these country roads picking up glass bottles, taking them to the store and turning them in for a refund so that I could save money and raise money to go on a Disney trip. And it's a Disney trip I'll never forget because the sacrifice that I made to go on this trip was great. And contrasting that thought with this thought, the sacrifice that God made for you and for me was great. And it's one that he'll never forget. He'll never forget you. He'll never forget me because the sacrifice that he made for us was great. And man, we ended our service and we sang. And man, I got to tell you something. I just before the recording of this saw the numbers. We had a record-breaking attendance today. The first time, man, that we broke this record. We were over 220 people at church today. And that is a record for Revive Church, especially since COVID. We broke these numbers way before COVID, but man, since the coronavirus and the pandemic, we have not seen attendance like that yet. Today was a special day. Now, some might say, hey, we did that because after the 11 o'clock service, our parking lot was a trunk or treat festival and there were people everywhere, cars everywhere, some really cool decorated cars, some amazing candy, kids in great costumes, even some adults were wearing some awesome costumes. And I really believe this, that today was a special day at Revive Church. And I'm thankful for every one of you that came to church today, that give at our church, that serve at our church, that pray for our church, that invite people to our church. And man, I believe this, that what had happened was today is great, but the best is yet to come. So what had happened was, here I am, it's Sunday afternoon, I'm tired. I ain't gonna lie, I'm tired. My oldest son just told me he's gonna take the younger kids around the block when it gets dark so they can trick or treat. My wife and I, we're gonna sneak off and go on a little date night, have a little meal together and just rest a little bit and let the rest of the day be a good day. That is the episode of Halloween 2021. What had happened was, it was awesome. I hope you were there. There's Jacob. He's coming in to what had happened was. All right. We'll see you on the next episode of What Had Happened Was.